Hello Legion, this is Hadrian. Thank you for being here and welcome to part 4 of a short series overviewing the upcoming Stellaris Apocalypse expansion and accompanying 2.0 update codenamed Cherryh. The update and release are scheduled for February 22nd of 2018, in case you missed that. And if you missed the last videos, this is what we know so far. Stellaris, as we know it, is about to change completely. These are just some of the features Apocalypse and Cherryh will bring to Stellaris as of the Apocalypse announcement. Since this video series started, however, the final 3 major dev diaries for Apocalypse and Cherryh have been posted, adding to the original list you see here. Here's what we're covering in part 4. Note the timestamps by each topic so you can jump to the portion of the video where I cover the topic you care about most. Each of these bullet points corresponds to a particular dev diary linked in the description below. So if you're intrigued by a certain change or just want to know every last little detail that I might not have touched on, check out the associated diary for that topic. Those who pick up the new expansion on the 22nd will be treated to a new random narrative element which the developers are calling a mid-game crisis as opposed to an end-game crisis, like the Contingency or the Prethren's Scourge, or everyone's favorite, the Unbidden. While this is less a story event along the lines of Horizon Signal and more of a new mechanic that will sometimes trigger and sometimes not, if it happens, it will only happen after the first 100 years of game time have passed. In order to set up an explanation for the mid-game crisis, however, I first have to talk about Marauders. Introduced as an exclusive gameplay element for Apocalypse owners, Marauders are spacefaring warrior cultures that live only on their space stations and ships and will spawn in particularly resource-rich pockets of the galaxy. Unlike pirates, however, Marauders will be empires that you can have a diplomatic interaction with. I'm not saying the interactions will be positive or even that friendly, but you can interact with them in the same way you interact with other empires. Multiple Marauder clans, if you want to call them clans, can spawn in a single galaxy and will each unify only under their own banner. Or will they? Keep listening. Marauders will always be hostile to regular empires, but will not attack unprovoked unless the decision is made to raid that empire or that empire pays an uninvited visit to their territory. If Marauders have marked your empire for raiding, they will attempt to extort tribute from you first in exchange for your safety. Empires that refuse will be attacked, and undefended stations and planets can have populations stolen as slaves. More on this later in the video. If you initially refuse, but then realize you don't have what it takes to fend off the Marauders militarily, you can still pay them off, but of course at a much steeper price given that you turned them down the first time. Regular empires can also pay Marauders to initiate such raids on other empires, giving players a new and interesting way to distract or weaken rival empires. Marauders can likewise be hired as mercenary fleets and even as individual admirals. Mercenary fleets will be contracted to you for 5 years, cannot be split, merged, or disbanded, and will of course cost you a pretty penny to enlist. Players who want to destroy Marauders outright will have the option of doing so, of course, but might not find themselves powerful enough until later in the game. So what's this mid-game crisis then? After some time has passed, again about 100 years, a great Khan may emerge to turn one of the Marauder clans, and only one for now, into a galactic horde, which will then begin to expand like a regular empire. Opposing empires can submit to the Khan at this point and become satrapies, paying some of their income and naval capacity as tribute in return for being left alone by the horde. The Great Khan, however, can, of course, be killed in battle. Even more intriguingly, the dev diary specifically mentions disease and assassination as ways for the Khan to die. While these may be randomly selected story elements for now, it is tantalizingly possible that a future plagues or espionage system, or, both, will replace such random narrative elements at some point in the future. Mind you, this is pure speculation on my part, but not exactly pure. Some of this has been overtly teased by Paradox and Wiz already. When the Great Khan dies, the Horde might utterly disintegrate, or it might randomly turn into a new democratic federation. This is true, it's in the dev diary. Either way, the introduction of this first mid-game crisis is sure to keep players on their toes once the initial eras of exploration and expansion have come and gone. So with all that being for Apocalypse owners, how does this set of changes affect owners of Stellaris and Utopia who don't pick up Apocalypse right away? The answer is new pirates. Similar to how pirates and barbarians spawn in, for instance, Master of Orion Conquer the Stars, and Civilization 6 even, pirates are able to spawn anywhere in the systems outside your borders once the Birth of Space Piracy event fires. This is especially possible when players attempt to surround a pocket of unclaimed stars with claimed ones, essentially punishing players who attempt to game the new territory management system in the Cherryh update. As a result of this change, space pirates are going to be a more constant threat, in the same way that pirates and barbarians are a constant threat in those other games that I mentioned. So long as there is an untamed galactic wilderness along your borders, pirates are something you're going to have to watch out for more regularly. As opposed to a single spawn that starts in the first 10 minutes of gameplay, you eliminate the first station in the first 20 minutes, and never really hear from pirates again unless you find another spawn location or the pirate galleon. By the way, only the pirate galleon will remain in the galaxy as a traditional static spawn. All the rest of the pirates, again, will randomly spawn in the so-called galactic wilderness outside of other empires' borders. As for the next set of changes, whether or not you pick up Apocalypse, most planetary edicts in the Cherryh update are being moved to the Empire side. The only planetary edicts that remain are those that would be very specific to situations on individual planets, such as planets with high unrest. So you might have an edict like martial law for a specific planet, but most of the edicts will now be Empire side. Empire edicts will also now function exactly like planetary edicts have in the past, costing a single lump sum of influence and having a set duration instead of having an unlimited duration for a small monthly cost. In the developer diary, Wiz noted that the main reasoning for this change was to make sure any built-up influence players have always has somewhere for them to put it, if they want to put it somewhere. As a result, players will now be able to use this pooled influence to bolster their entire empire in new and powerful ways. Another positive aspect of this change is that because edicts will no longer take away from monthly influence gain, influence will generally build up faster, giving us room to claim new systems under the new claims and influence rules discussed in this series' opening video, as well as the power to utilize edicts more often in general because you're building up influence more often. Oh, and edicts will now have a message pop up when they expire. And so, by the way, will curator research agreements. I'll give you all a minute to jump up and down and lose your minds. Also in Cherryh, an entirely new type of edict called a campaign has been added. These will cost pretty large amounts of energy rather than influence and are unlocked by the planetary unification tech. From what has been revealed so far, where edicts are often more targeted towards resource production modifiers affecting variables that interact with your population's bonuses and traits in some way, campaigns seem to more directly boost your population without touching resources, such as by improving leader experience gain for 10 years, improving leader lifespans for 10 years, or reducing consumer goods consumption. Again, these are campaigns. They're intended to influence populations, hence the name. Along the same vein, Apocalypse owners will get an exclusive third type of edict, which are being called Unity ambitions. Paradox is calling these, quote, extremely powerful, end quote, and their costs will scale to the number of traditions you've unlocked in an identical way to how new traditions scale in the amount of Unity they require as you unlock them. Like the new Empire Edicts system and like campaigns, Unity ambitions are aimed at giving players a place to put resources that traditionally pile up in late game Stellaris. One example we've seen so far of a Unity ambition is a 10-year, 20% increase in research speed, accompanied by an extra research alternative. Just let that marinate in the back of your minds for a second while I move on to the final topic. Stellaris players, regardless of purchasing Apocalypse, will see a number of changes to the Ascension perks system in the 2.0 Cherryh update. The biological Ascension path, for example, has gotten a buff, and plans have been made to add more selectable traits to the game overall, including for robotic pops, but that's for some point after Cherryh and Apocalypse. There has been a buff, but more traits and robotic pops might be coming down the line. Maybe even in the next patch or two, we'll see. As covered in previous videos, several Ascension perks will now be available to owners of the base game, not just for those who own Utopia. And if you watched the previous videos, you might remember that this is pretty much any Ascension perk that isn't directly associated with megastructures or Ascension paths, which are the Utopia-specific features. You may have been curious while I was covering that stuff how an Ascension perk in that group, like Interstellar Dominion for instance, will work now that borders, like we talked about in the first video, are simply drawn between stars and no longer blob outward autonomously by some radius that you can change based on Ascension perks and policies and civics. Interstellar Dominion will now provide a 20% reduction to the influence cost of new starbases and claims made on other Empire systems. Mastery of Nature, which has been rebalanced more than once since Utopia, no longer unlocks tile blocker text at all. Before you sigh towards your screen, however, Mastery of Nature now unlocks a new planetary edict called Land Clearance, which can permanently increase the size of any planet by 1 to 3 tiles, as long as said planet is somewhere below the maximum planet size of 25 tiles. The number of tiles added will be inversely proportionate to the size of the planet, meaning that smaller planets will grow by 3 tiles every time. Larger planets like 22 or 23 tile planets may only get 1. Of course, 24 tile planets will always only get 1 because the maximum will still be 25. Of course, this edict is only usable once per planet, don't get too excited. The World Shaper perk is now going to be required in order to terraform planets into Gaia worlds. As an added caveat, Gaia worlds will now have better resource production overall instead of simply making their inhabitants unusually happy. And along with these updates to the existing perks, 5 new Ascension perks, 2 for the Cherryh update, and 3 exclusive to Apocalypse have been added. One, of course, is the Colossus Project perk, which allows construction of Colossus-class planet destroyers in the same way that Voidborn simply unlocks orbital habitats, for example. Eternal Vigilance, however, increases the hit points of starbases and defense platforms, as well as buffs the number of defense platforms your starbases can support overall. So this is a really good perk for turtles and other defensive players. Executive Vigor doubles edict duration without affecting the cost in any way, both making every edict doubly valuable for its price and encouraging players to overlap edicts because they last longer. Moving on to the Apocalypse perks, Nihilistic Acquisition is a perk that will unlock raiding, which I mentioned earlier in the video in my discussion of Marauders. This is an orbital bombardment stance that will allow empires of certain types, Gestalt Consciousness, Authoritarian, and Xenophobe, to abduct and enslave pops from other empires' worlds. So not everyone's going to have access to Nihilistic Acquisition, but those who do will be able to raid and steal your population as slaves. Enigmatic Engineering is the second Apocalypse exclusive perk, and in addition to an empire-wide sensor range boost, it's going to prevent your ships from ever leaving any scannable battle debris behind, so no one will ever be able to reverse engineer your technology. It'll be a lot harder to catch up to you if you're a tech-focused player. And finally, owners of Apocalypse will be able to choose from 3 new Origin civics when creating custom empires. Wiz has noted a desire to flesh out empire origins more fully in future updates to the game, so these first civics are likely a foundation for a more detailed system focused on empire backstories due out in the future. The Post-Apocalyptic Civic, perfect for my Roman Star Empire from Roma Galactica, actually, spawns your empire on a tomb world, but gives your entire species 10-year lifespan and 70% tomb world habitability bonuses from the start of the game. Life-seeded empires, on the other hand, spawn on maximum-size Gaia planets, 25-tile Gaia planets, but will have 0% base habitability of biomes that are not habitats, ring worlds, or, of course, Gaia planets. And last but not least, the Barbaric Despoilers Civic will open the raiding stance to an empire from the start of the game, allowing them to take slaves and wield a special casus belli to raid neighboring empires from the beginning of the game. Barbaric Despoilers, however, will be unable to form any kind of defensive pacts or join federations and will receive, quote, mild to moderate, end quote, negative opinion modifiers depending on the ethics of the empires that they're interacting with. And that's all for part 4 of the series. Look out for maybe one more update beyond this one as information becomes available and as the Apocalypse expansion gets closer to its February 22nd release date. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to follow along, and don't forget to check the description for links to the associated dev diaries. Comments are always welcome. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time.